Hello and welcome to Art Show. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Jim Lee. Hey, Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
So I want to start like I normally do, flipping over to images of yours. For those people who don't know about you and your work, this is a great way to sort of introduce them. So I went online, I went on to your site, and I grabbed a couple of images that were interesting to me. These are in no particular order. And I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about this piece. What am I looking at?
Well, this is a I guess what most people would probably say like a works on paper or a drawing. This is a
Okay.
framed object, and so I deal a lot with variety of materials. In this case, this is an old cover from a Van Gogh book, and
Hmm.
so you can see that there's
I
basically
got it.
writing on the left side, but I've obscured it so it becomes more just visual aesthetics and things like that. And I take the H and I extended it off to the top edge because I typically like to try to
Line
hold
it up.
my,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I like to try to like, hold these compositions together a little bit. And when I was working on this one, it's funny you bring this one up because this is actually one of my, I don't like my work, to just
Uh-huh.
right off the bat. This
That's
is
okay. Me too. I mean, I like your work. I don't like my own work. So
right.
I
Well,
understand.
no, you can say I don't like my work, whatever. I'm just telling you, this piece, I actually don't really mind this piece. And so
Okay.
I'm uh actually somewhat thrilled and concerned that you selected this one. Thank
Well,
you very much.
I actually we have more to go through, but I have two questions about this piece that I want
Oh,
to ask you. The first is that this shape that's the central shape, the extended E shape, there's no other way to put it. Does that reference anything, or is that just an invented shape? Does it mean anything to you? Should it mean something to me?
no, most of my work, I think it obviously, I think everything probably comes from some sort of reference point. This probably comes from somewhere, but I would not, it's just an invented shape
Okay.
uh, that I was working on. My process is pretty, I kind of work on about 17, 18 things all at once
Hmm.
because I don't want to really know when I'm making something because I tend to like start to cramp up a little bit if I think I'm making something. So and during the course of working on this, I was probably using my X-Acto knife. I like to cut. I like the physical versus the visual.
Hmm.
Hence,
Hmm.
it's actually the top part is actually a piece of paper that was cut probably from something else that I was working on. And I stuck it down and then realized that if I connected the bottom shape with aluminum paint, I could kind of somewhat match it up, but the texture and the viscosity and the reflective nature of it would change slightly. And then as you can see in the middle to the lower section, you can see the graphite mark where I was going to fill in the rest of it, but decided, no, that's fine. I don't need to do it.
Right.
Done.
So my second question is, I want to ask you about the framing,
Yeah.
right? So this is a custom frame, and you've painted it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first thought I had was I was wondering, have you seen those frames that Hockney painted in the was it the late '80s, where he would make prints and then paint the frames? There was similarities there. Now,
Well,
were you thinking about anything like that, or was this more just an extension of the image?
I love Hockney and I do really kind of enjoy goofing around with art history. But Craig, in that situation, no, was not referencing Hockney. What simply happened in this one, I was just being my card carrying Libra self when I was at the
Okay.
framer. And they said, well, what about like a natural frame? They have all those little corner
Right.
units. And they
Yeah.
said, how about this? Well, we could go with a dark. What about a light? And I said, why don't you just do that? And they said, do what? I said, what you got right there? I said,
Right.
it's really good. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, just do that. And
Yeah.
that would be it. And they said, we've never done that. I said, well, there you go. I'm out of here.
You're a framer's nightmare, I think.
Oh,
Well, I
yeah, they
appreciate the
love it.
idea that the like the black where they end, like if you were to extend them at, it does make a grid system on the
Exactly. Yeah.
picture, helps push it
Which
all
is a
together.
lot of everything about my work is based off of those
Yeah.
kind of natures. Oh
So
God, another
speaking of
one.
frame, you got another one there that I saw
Another
that
one.
this one, I love this particular piece. made me think of the early collages of Motherwell.
Oh, good Lord. I would say uh, when I was a little kid, I was I said to myself when I was 14 that I wanted to become a painter. And I grew up in a really tiny town in Michigan, more cows than folk by far. And we had a little tiny library called the Sparks Memorial Library. And it probably had 7 art books in it, all in black and white imagery, a little tipped in, but a couple
Uh-huh.
of images, those little old school. And there was a modernist book or something, and it had Motherwell and about 3 or 4 of those collages, and maybe one of the elegy pieces, one of the big orange and black pieces. And I was just like, holy smokes, this is
So that
amazing.
maybe set the foundation for
Yeah,
future work.
yeah, I would say so. Like Schwitter's,
Yeah, yeah.
Motherwell, later on, obviously, like IMOCA Noble,
Hmm.
a lot of the Germans. But at the same time, there's always this kind of, I don't know, somebody sometimes I think I'm a little too folksy and a
Hmm.
little too a little too you know I guess like maybe Grandma Moses with my aesthetic. And so maybe there's a little of that kind of making its way into the work as well.
Well, this particular piece is like almost the opposite of the Grandma Moses piece. So I loved this piece. For me, thinking about as a painter, I'm always thinking about the flat surface and how the picture can come out of that flat surface. How you're not just making a picture, that you're actually making an object, like an art object,
Sure.
even though it's a painting on stretcher bars that we're used to seeing. So can you tell me a little bit about this?
Well, I mean, you basically just kind of said everything there. This was, you
All right, I'll
know,
just keep doing it then.
yeah, you're doing a great job, Craig. That's, this is, I'd rather you talk about the work. A lot of times, I guess, I'm trying to make a painting by doing as little painting as possible, if that makes any sense to you.
Mhm.
Uh, I made this out on a residency at probably, I think that's maybe like 2008, probably 2008, something like that. And I'd never been on a residency before, but somebody nominated me, and so I went out to it. And because I'm way too old to be doing residencies, that's
Right.
that's a younger version of what we're doing here. But I just remember it was out near the water. I think a lot of the stuff I do sort of deals with water, landscapes, things like that. And so whenever I go to a place, because I work in situ a lot, I'll go over to Europe or something, and people have me work on site. And so this is a time where I was working on site, and I was digging around by like some dumpsters, by some old by some sail, like shipping areas and stuff. And I found some old sailcloth. And so that's a lot of what the work is out of here. It's based off of some old sailcloth that I found out of a dumpster. I do a lot of scavenging.
Well, for me, what I enjoy about your work is the secret geometry that's
Yeah,
in it.
yeah.
That's not quite a golden rectangle, but it almost looks like a double golden rectangle. And it took me, I was at this at least 10-15 minutes before I realized that I don't think you planned this, but there's like a horizon line on it. So I start thinking about landscape immediately.
Right,
But
right. Totally.
that didn't start for the first 10 minutes, which I always think is kind of exciting when people don't see stuff in the
Well,
work.
Well, I appreciate
But
that, because that's kind of where I want to. The work should kind of reveal itself a little bit more slowly, and I think that's hopefully I'm doing my job then.
well, this piece does not reveal itself slowly, I would say. This is the opposite. So I was thrilled to see this. For me, I'm always loving when there's a little bit of humor in fine art. And to me, I had a chuckle. All right. I saw this. It was great. But then I started to see it as not just a face, but as a shape and then other shapes within it. Is this also found canvas or found
Well,
ground?
I think a lot of times, I'm always trying to like, play with the notion of what created, what's located,
Mhm.
and then incorporate that into the work. So, my studio is just it's the flotsam and jetsam of every other piece that has either been Frankensteined or been torn
Uh-huh.
apart, cobbled back together. In this situation here, yeah, this is just an old canvas that I cobbled together. I suture. I always say that I don't sew things together. I suture. It's more of a triage unit. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Very
pieces that
archival.
exactly. I'm trying to keep art conservation alive for at least another 50, 60
That's good
years.
because yeah, you got to keep them busy because otherwise
That's right.
they have nothing to
I
do.
yeah, in a lot of ways, I think that's funny you bring that even kind of in jest because I always think that work should be maybe viewed a little bit more finite
Mhm.
rather than infinite. Like it does live maybe perhaps beyond us, but maybe not without a little resuscitation or something like that. It
Yeah.
needs help along the way. So, I kind of like that kind of tenuous. I like work that I like to describe my work as being sort of fugitive. Like it's here and yet it's sort of not.
All right. Yeah, I get that because I always tell like my students about color, and I always have to remind them, look, everything fades. All color, my car fades, right? So even those old masters that are all those gray, yellows, and whatnot, it's like no, they would have used white, right? So it's
Yeah,
kind of an eye opener.
I agree, because there's something about like the sense of a patina giving it like gravitas. But no, when you're putting down the color, if you're really are serious, you're putting
Yeah.
down some color. I
Do
don't
you,
know if it's as orange as my hat, but I mean sometimes you really kind of like want to experiment a little bit. And
do
I
you
think
remember the stink that they made when they cleaned the Sistine Chapel? And there were people that had their lives. No, this is not right. You've over cleaned it. It looks like a cartoon. It's like, well, guess what? Yeah.
that's right. I
So,
mean, you had to see it from, 75 feet. So yeah, it better sparkle.
so I have a couple of questions for you. Some you've already answered because you were spot on with that. So I want to start it actually at the beginning because I love learning about your artist's starts. Do you remember as a child your first exposure to art? Was it those books, or was there something else that was sort of like a thunderclap moment for you?
Yeah, I grew up on a river, a dam controlled river in southwestern Lower Michigan, and one of my favorite things to do in the summer times, about 3 or 4 times a year, the 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 state or the county or the city, whoever, the township, whatever it is,
Mm,
would regulate the dam. And so they would let the water out more. And so you as homeowners, you could clear out your riverbank areas and things. And I would wake up and the water would be down. I'd be like, oh, this is great. I love this. And so I would like gather all my crap together and my
uh,
bags and stuff. And I would just go and circle all up and down and just picking up all this refuse and all this garbage and
uh-huh.
come back and start cobbling everything together. And I
Uh-huh.
think maybe that was maybe my first time making something. So like, when I was really a little kid, I also used to my grandmother worked at Simplicity Fabric in a tiny town called Niles, Michigan. And they used to make the fabrics for ladies' dresses, like the patterns, the big
Right.
patterns. So my parents would leave me at grandma's house while they went to go watch a movie, and I was scared to death at grandma's house. She had the beautiful, starburst formica table,
Right.
and I'd go over there, and I was like, oh God, I don't want to be here. But you always have like a big wad of that paper, like it's like essentially like giant newsprint, and I
Yeah.
would sit down and draw for hours. I would make maps, and I think a lot of my stuff I think deals with mapping. I think it has to deal with, like I said, landscapes. It has to deal with, what is, obviously what we've experienced
Yeah.
and we understand and interpret our world. So I would say that,
Well,
uh,
flash forward me
yeah,
forward. At what point did you decide, hey, I think I could be an artist. I'm going to pursue that. Was it
I,
always that way, or did you?
I don't think I'm there yet, Craig.
Okay.
I'm still waiting for that moment.
Maybe one or two more pictures, and then then
Do
it'll seal the
more.
deal.
I mean, I remember, you know, at 10, at age 10, owning my, like mowing lawns in my neighborhood. At age 11, picking blueberries, at, getting up at 5 in the morning. And then at, like age 12, helping my uncle doing roofing. And then at age 13, learning how to drywall and do rough construction and all this. And I was like, and I was a carny, from like 12 till 14.
Mhm.
And then I, and then I was, and and then I was, I worked in a warehouse, loading bird food. And
Mhm.
holy shit, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And my dad, I love my dad, my mom, they're awesome folks, but I didn't want a desk job. There's no way I could do a desk job. So I was like, I guess I'm going to try this painting thing. So when I was a little kid, or probably 14, 15 years old, I'd seen a picture of, I always tell this to folks that, I was thumbing through one of these old books and I found this portrait of Edwin Denby by Larry Rivers.
Uh-huh.
It's in one of these monograph books or whatever at my local library. And I remember just looking at this piece, and I was like 14 years old, and I just got done, I don't know, laying drywall or something. And I was taking a shower, and the water was hitting my face, and I said, when I grow up, I'm going to be an artist like Larry Rivers. And I
Nice.
hope I can portrait like that.
You're one of the few people that has me beat because I decided to be an artist at 16.
Really?
So 14, that's even better. Yeah, I never looked back.
I grew up in a tiny town, so you had to get out fast. So
Yeah, well, yeah, I got that.
you might have grown up in a bigger town.
So I want to talk a little bit about process. So I'm fascinated with process, especially like artists like yourself. First off, do you keep a sketchbook?
I love sketchbooks. Yeah.
Do you actually use the sketchbooks for paintings then? Like do you sketch out your ideas?
No,
No.
no.
So the
I just
sketchbooks are separate.
sketchbooks are their own thing. I love
Okay.
sketchbook. I, my process is like, um, I love to look through my old sketchbooks. I love to, um, you know, I guess I do thinking in there. I guess I do,
Loosening up kind of a thing.
yeah. I mean, I
Okay.
do a lot of works on paper.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, I guess I guess I draw all the time, even though I don't know what drawing is. So I'm always making marks.
Well,
And
if you don't use a sketchbook,
yeah,
my real question here is when you're going to make a new work, how much of that work is planned out, even if it's thought in your head, versus experimentation and play?
I mean, I think the work just kind of evolves, and I just have to be here and be present in order to facilitate it.
Okay.
You know,
But
to
it's not
me,
it's not it's not fully formed in your head and you're just making what you're thinking.
I hope not. I mean,
Okay.
I make work. I think, somebody asked me once, why do you make work? And I always have a couple of different answers for that. Uh, some of the, that I just told you about trying to get away from
Mm-hmm.
working, doing odd jobs and stuff. And although this is the oddest job I'll ever have, um, I think there's something to be said for just being able to be to 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 get my rear end in the studio
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible and make something relevant that day, something that is relevant to me, because I guess, maybe I guess I see things as they're kind of like existing on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
or whenever anybody comes into my studio for the first time, I always say, just because it's on the floor doesn't mean it's not finished. And just because it's on the wall doesn't mean it is finished. Everything just kind of fluctuates around. So if I start seeing something
Mm-hmm.
and then I just go, I want to see what that looks like together, then I just make it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's pretty much how I work. I think that's, if I kind of can, so I have to have a bunch of junk around me,
Right.
a lot of my process around me.
Right.
in order to see something and then start making those arrangements and making those connections, those
I
visual
totally
connections.
get that. I mean, it's the old, I'm always thinking of that old Buddhist philosophy. You know, it's never the same river twice. So it might be the same flotsam that you're looking at on the floor, but on
Totally.
Thursday you discover something that you wouldn't have on Tuesday.
Oh, totally, exactly. Because
Yeah.
your mindset, your thinking, you're different. Everything. There's so many things that affect our creativity. And you asked me a little bit about my process. My process, a lot of times, there's usually a lot of music going on.
Mhm.
A lot. I love sound. I actually don't even necessarily always
As
like
a
music.
distraction
I think so
to
because
the subconscious.
I like repeat. I like the repeat function because I like things over and over,
Mhm.
and because then I stop actually listening to what I think I'm supposed to hear, and I start anticipating what I know is coming next.
Mhm.
Then I like to get lost in those kind of trains of thought. Like Brian Eno, I think is an incredible artist. I know he works in sound and he was typically viewed as a musician, but I think he's like probably one of the most creative people that I can think
Mhm.
of. I know we talked about Motherwell. I've referenced Schwitters. I can go on and on about
Right.
artists,
Yeah.
but I mean like Brian Eno or somebody like that. I think sound is extremely important to me, even though I don't think anybody would really know that about
Yeah.
how but
Yeah.
I do. I make sound machines.
Okay.
I,
Ooh, good to
I,
know.
I'm always messing around with sound in some
Have you
sort of.
ever exhibited sound with your images? Okay. Got to
Yeah.
check out one of those. So you alluded to this a little bit earlier. One last question about process, which is when you have a work that you think is finished, my guess is that it's never really finished. Uh, do you ever rework your pieces after, say, a long time?
You know,
You ever discard?
no, you always keep. You always
Oh,
keep.
you always keep it. Even the complete failures, you still keep them?
I mean, you know, a pretty good artist once said to me, Jim, you make you make good paintings, but can you make a great painting?
Hmm.
And I said, yeah. I said, I think I know where you're going with this because, you know, it's like if we're always working and we know our limits and we know there's a line in the sand and I think good painters know where that line is and they go, oh yeah, I know where that line is right there. And then there's some decent painters, some really, and they might even tip over that line every so often and see what the hell's going on over there. Oh, I don't know
Hmm.
what's going on.
Hmm.
But the great ones, they don't know there's a line. They just go. And
Hmm.
the thing is, it's like they may they're my idea is I just want to make a load of shit
Hmm.
and and then I might make something really really impactful and then I'm going to make another load of shit and then I might make something more impactful, something memorable for me that day. And I said what I really hope happens is that because I'm a studio rat,
Hmm.
I love to be in the studio, and I said I just want to come to the point where I make something so heinous and so frightening that I scare myself out of the studio and I don't want to go back for maybe
Hmm.
a week.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Craig, I've never done that. I've
Well, you're
never
young.
that piece. So like when you ask me when have I become a painter, I'm not a painter yet because I haven't made that piece that has
All right.
scared the shit out of me. So I had to get out of the studio. Like, where did that come from? Who made that? Because I want to push myself, and that's my intention is to push
Yeah.
myself beyond where I think I should be going. But I don't know if I'll ever get there, and I think that might be okay.
I, I've I've said this quote before, and it was a de Kooning quote, and I always think it's true. He said that, you know, to him, artists were lucky if they come up with two or three good ideas in their entire life. And I equate that as two or three good paintings, right? So
Possibly.
I'm at one so far. So we'll see.
Well, you got me beat. You got me beat. Sure.
So I have time for just two more quick questions. First off, I'd like to know just briefly, I want to talk about color with you, right? Because you have color and you use it very sparingly, but when you do use it, right, it means something. It's there, right? You're not choosing wishy-washy colors or whatnot. What does color mean to you?
I don't get color at all.
Really? Okay.
I think, I mean,
Well, your viewers are impressed with your non-color understanding.
I really, I don't get it at all. I went to go see the Basquiat Warhol show yesterday with my 11-year-old daughter and my wife. I was like, I said, now that's some color.
Mhm.
That's what I get out of that show. Oh, that's some color, but I mean, I I think it's funny that color is light,
Yeah.
and we don't work with light necessarily. I mean, some artists might work with light, like Dan Flavin and Keith Saulnier and Mary Weatherford, to a certain extent. But because color is light.
Yeah.
But in our world, as painters, color is pigment, and pigment is so bastardized. I mean, it's just it can be like it can be really
Yeah.
deep, it can be tawdry,
Well,
fugitive.
I've talked to so many artists, and that I've heard the spectrum, because some artists talk about emotion with color all the time.
Oh.
For me, I think of color as manipulation. I'm always like manipulating the viewer, and I can do that through color. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
No,
Anyway,
to me, I just, if I see it, I like it. I'm like, I'm a chimp. If I like, if I like, I just use it. I don't
I
even
think
want
that's the title of
necessarily.
your next show. I think.
I don't have certain.
Color, I'm a chimp.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I like this.
yeah,
It's like, I like that. I
yep,
see it. I go, yeah, I'll use that.
okay.
Fine.
So I've got time for just one last question. Question I ask a lot of artists on this show. Very simple. What does making art do for you?
Probably gives me a lot of anxiety.
Mm,
It probably somewhat keeps me out of. I like the tomcat. I like to go out and hang out and do stuff. So I guess it kind of keeps me out of trouble because I'm in here a lot.
all right.
Um,
Keeps me out of trouble is the perfect phrase for that
yeah.
answer.
And
Like that.
I think that's, but at the same time, it probably creates a lot of trouble. So again, a card carrying Libra, I'm always trying to balance a lot of things in my life. So
Okay.
and maybe that's why I do this is to kind of like monitor myself.
Yeah. Well, Jim, it's been so much fun talking to you. I love having these conversations with artists where sometimes you say something just sort of offhand, but it changes my understanding of your work. And you did that like 2 or 3 times in this brief conversation. So I want to thank you for coming by and talking with me today about your work. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch today. Of course, we love it when you like and share, and of course, subscribing. That really helps us, propels us forward. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section. If I can't answer them, I'll be happy to pass them along. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in today. And again, Jim, thank you. I really appreciate talking to you
Thank
today.
you. Happy
You
New
have a
Year,
good day.
everybody.
Take care.